Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take a look at the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction, which will be perfecting on the 20th of February of 2026 at 0 degrees of Aries, and will continue to play out and stick with us for a couple of years as we have Saturn and Neptune co-present in Aries. So I have some of those dates here. We just had Neptune move into Aries for the long haul on the 26th of January. And that's going to stick with us for a very long time until the 21st of May of 2038, when it will first leave the sign. But we will continue to have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction by sign as long as Saturn is also in Aries with Neptune. So that's going to be from the 13th of February of this year through the 12th of April of 2028. We basically have a continuing Saturn-Neptune conjunction playing out over the coming couple of years. So I want to dig into what that means for us primarily on a personal level. And then we'll take that through sign by sign, and there are timestamps for the sign by sign horoscopes. And those should fit perfectly for your rising sign, in which case it will align with the whole sign house in your chart that contains Aries, but feel free to check that out for your sun as well. So let's first define our terms here. We're dealing with Saturn and we're dealing with Neptune. And a lot of people say that these are contradictory energies, and they are definitely very, very different. Part of what Neptune does is challenge the structure, the limits, the discipline of Saturn. It wants to transcend these human elements of rules, our notions of human authority. And it does so by removing limits. So it looks at those structures, those limits, and it questions them really deeply, and it can wind up dissolving a lot of those. So Neptune's part in this is encouraging us to reach further than what already exists, to go beyond the past and dream something else up. What does the ideal look like, and how can we reach for that? It transcends the mundane. And so with Saturn ruling authority and institutions, of course, we tend to see a dissolving when these energies come together of the notions of belief or culture or illusion, the narratives that we hold on to, the assumptions that we have about the world and about our worldly institutions and authorities that have some notion of control over us, or at least those are the stories that we have told ourselves. We tend to run with those for long periods of time. And then these two come together, begin to deeply question each other, and the narratives that hold up these structures begin to fall apart. Now, Saturn and Neptune do also, in my view, have some overlap. They're both very wise. Saturn looks to what has worked. So it looks to what is the status quo? What does the past tell us about what's functional, what's going to work for us, especially on a societal level, in our own personal lives with our behaviors, our patterns, etc. Neptune reaches a bit deeper into the collective unconscious. So what is it that actually drives us? What deeply is our motivation? Where does that impetus to live our lives, especially in such a way that is in alignment with our beliefs, where does that come from? So they both do reach really deep in terms of roots. And I think that's part of the reason why they're so good when they come together at questioning those roots and looking at them really honestly, breaking down what's no longer going to work for us, given all of the information, the knowledge that we've accumulated since their last meeting, which by the way was in 1989, 36 years ago. And what have we learned? What's been added to that wisdom such that we know better now, again, what motivates us, what moves us, what works, what's functional, what do we believe in now? So I do want to very quickly touch on, and this may even seem like I'm brushing over it, what we're likely to see in the world from this, because I feel like I've covered that quite a bit. But this conjunction is happening at 0 Aries, and this is considered the world point. So this speaks to the beginning and the end of the zodiac. So this is a very, 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 very far-reaching renewal period, much more so than your usual Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So this does speak to a global reset, a world turning point. This is very, very high visibility, high impact. So what's going to basically wind up taking place is, and we can see this to some extent already, we're likely to see this more so as these two move into Aries and conjoin exactly, is again the dissolving of old narratives. All of the belief structures, the institutions, the authority figures that we've relied upon and that we've taken as given come under incredible scrutiny, and a lot of that winds up breaking down due to the fact that it's not going to serve us going forward. Saturn, as it passes Neptune, is also able to take Neptune's imaginings of how we can move beyond the status quo, and Saturn can get to work on building that, especially in Aries, where it's very initiatory. So we will get new structures, new beliefs, new narratives, a new way of going about our collective and social and global life together through this alignment. It's going to be bumpy for sure, but that's what's happening under the surface of all of these massive shifts and changes that are going on. I do also want to point out, because of the fact that this is happening on the 20th of February, and of course I'm putting this out ahead of that point, but when this goes exact, we will have just had a big solar eclipse in Aquarius, which by the traditional rulership is a sign ruled by Saturn. And so around that period of time, February and March, things are likely to get really confusing and really up in the air and quite crazy. We're likely to see events that we didn't expect would happen and that are going to stick with us for a long time in terms of their impact. And I should just quickly mention, we're going to get a lot of eclipses in Aquarius while Saturn is co-present with Neptune and Aries. So this is going to be a very loud moment, but the restructuring will continue in the coming couple of years. And in fact, the eclipses in Aquarius and Saturn's sojourn through Aries are weirdly aligned with each other. So this is going to be a big Saturn-Neptune conjunction. This is speaking to a completely new global order that is being ushered in during this time. Of course, we can kind of see this playing out already. Now, before we get further into it, I should just say, if you wind up enjoying this video, I would really greatly appreciate it if you gave it a like or a hype. That helps to spread the video around. And do consider sticking around by subscribing. We tend to look at these major alignments from a global perspective as well as a personal perspective, taking them through sign by sign. We do that each week. And I also do have one little housekeeping announcement, which is that the booking system that I'm using did change. So if that looks a little bit different on the website for booking personal readings, that is why I changed up the system. So let's get into it. Generally speaking, when Saturn and Neptune come together, the questions that wind up arising are what's real and what's possible. So these are very Saturnian, Neptunian questions. But as they begin to scrutinize each other by asking each other these questions, and then trying to come to some agreement about that, anything that's not fitting within that fundamental framework that they're able to agree upon, which to me is ultimate truth, that can no longer stand. So that can't come with us. Saturn-Neptune conjunctions are well known for taking those kinds of things away from us forcibly if we don't give them up willingly. But it is fundamentally to create space for something that is more sound and better aligned for us on a personal level and also on a global level. So with any Saturn-Neptune conjunction, there is a search for meaning because we become disillusioned with faulty beliefs, faulty structures, faulty foundations in our lives. And these are often in the form of what we know deep down at this point, with them having come so close together already, are often in the form of empty promises, outworn motivations, old dreams that we've had that just no longer feel right or no longer seem truly viable. So under this influence, as much as ever, we're wanting to create something meaningful in our lives and from our lives, and that can wind up taking the form of a cause. But I also want for us to keep in mind that this is happening in Aries. And so for many of us, this is likely to be fundamentally personal and individual. This alignment is also encouraging a sense of sacrifice for something greater. So we may be called to surrender something in our lives that we believe we need, a comfort zone of sorts. It's likely something that we're holding on to with our ego or that we're attached to somehow with our identity. And this can be a willful sacrifice, or like I said, if we're not willing to let go of unhelpful or unhealthy aspects of our ego and our attachments, external experiences can appear to force our hand with this. But what's important here is that this tends to be followed with Saturn moving on from Neptune, getting into that initiation and building stage, the waxing stage from that conjunction to Neptune. This is followed by an opportunity to create something new for ourselves that's more true or aligned for us, something that represents a meaningful or personal contribution. Sometimes this is simply by setting an example, living our own truth on a personal level, and showing others basically that that can be done. So leading by example. But we may also be called to sacrifice time, energy, emotion in order to contribute to some greater cause than ourselves. And by doing so, then gain a greater sense of ourselves and what we truly value in life. So even when this does wind up going collective, consider what it is speaking to about ourselves and to ourselves. It's trying as well to build us up. But ultimately, under Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, we're forced to face a sense of reality and limitation. And this can be due to having over-relied upon something that wasn't genuinely true or aligned with us, and something that had served a purpose, but is no longer, or possibly even something that has become corrupted in our lives, something that did go off track, and we can no longer follow that while maintaining our sense of alignment. Often we wind up finding as well, and this is, I think, a big part of the illusionment, that we were trying too hard to make it work for us. We were holding on to it. So again, with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, this is going to be calling for us to individuate in different areas of our lives, to establish for ourselves our own identity, rather than in relation to something else or as belonging to something outside of ourselves. Often we will take on social roles that are ready-made. It's very easy to just kind of slot ourselves into a position that already exists, or a role that's already well-defined. But by doing so, we wind up handing over some sense of control over ourselves, control over our individual choices, our individual values or actions, our feelings on certain matters, our thoughts, our ideas on certain matters, and perhaps most importantly, our perspectives on things, our sense of our possibility or our potential. We do tend to hand a lot of this over to the external, but Aries is calling that in. It's asking us to build that for ourselves. So with the help of this transit, we can absolutely crystallize new identities during this period of time. So some of the questions that I have collected for helpful meditation on, or thinking about, or journaling about when it comes to this, I collected these last year when I wrote about all of this, is, are there ways in which I look for identity or definition outside of myself? What do I truly value? Who do I truly want to be? How do I truly want to be seen? What truly makes me proud? What do I truly enjoy? What am I truly talented at? And what are my true limitations? And how can I challenge them by becoming more aligned within myself? And so, as I mentioned before, if we can face those questions without retreating into that comfort zone or a sense of denial, it's going to wind up taking us very far in realizing a new and truer identity for ourselves. So looking at the disillusionment that we're going to be experiencing under the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, where the veil is taken off of our eyes about certain things, we can get hung up on disappointment around that. We can get hung up on, oh, well, I wish I hadn't wasted my time believing that thing that wasn't actually true or wasn't actually going to pan out, or whatever it is. But if we can take this opportunity to focus on the building aspect of this, the renewal, the rebirth, this new opportunity that we have in this moment, I think that that's going to be really helpful. And with that disillusionment, with Saturn-Neptune in Aries, some of that is going to be with an outdated version of ourselves. Now, this alignment is also going to call on a lot of us to face internal fears, the limitations that we place upon ourselves to make ourselves feel safe by not exploring outside of the boundaries or the comfort zones that Saturn has set for us, and that Saturn has said, if you don't go outside of these lines, you won't be punished. Those lines are no longer there. We're allowed to reach outside of that. And we should be reaching outside of that during this period of time. And a lot of the fears that we're going to be confronting during this time are going to be around standing up for ourselves, doing things on our own, being really courageous, taking calculated risks, becoming what we are afraid to be for fear of rejection or alienation or insecurity. I really expect a lot of people will be facing and overcoming a sense of imposter syndrome as well, sense of inadequacy or fears of our own capability or strength, fears around being able to be self-sufficient and self-reliant, as well as our ability to realize our own really big major goals and to believe Neptune and Aries in ourselves, right? But this is precisely what's going to be rewarded. So we're going to be called to be really persistent toward our goals. This is going to take discipline and integrity, even when we face setbacks, delays, and these are likely with Saturn and Aries. The timing can be a bit weird, but as long as we're able to maintain our long-term vision that we create during this period of time, and rather than seeking instant gratification, trying to be very disciplined, deliberate about our actions, that's going to be really excellent. Now, one thing with the timing here, I feel that Neptune and Aries will give us some illusions about quick fixes or a sense that there's got to be some shortcut. And if we could just reach for that shortcut, then things are going to be great. Saturn has a tendency to shut that down. So even if we find a shortcut and we take it, it's unlikely to really work out. So again, I would really just preach a lot of delayed gratification, persistence, discipline, patience with ourselves during this period of time. Because we're also going to feel simultaneously a bit rushed, and like when we try to rush, that doesn't quite work. So again, that's why I'm just going to say finding our rhythm here, I think, is also going to help us a whole bunch. This isn't about rushing. It's also not about getting stopped in our tracks or not pushing through the obstacles that we run across. The important thing here is really to keep our eyes on the goal rather than fixating on how easily or when quickly we're going to wind up achieving it. It might not be easy, it might not be fast, but it is sure and it is aligned now. This is what's going to work for us going forward. So this is the structure that we want to create for ourselves. So in terms of action steps, I think it's going to be really essential that we spend this time creating new structures for our dreams, establishing routines around what we're reaching for here, setting aside time, trying to do really good time management, following that game plan, even when it feels difficult, even when we feel a little bit disillusioned. But for those of us, especially who work well with Aries energy, which is quite quick and quite action orientated, remembering that the growth of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is guaranteed through discipline. So discipline responds really well to practice. And even if we can't guarantee that a specific goal will manifest, we can guarantee that through the action and through the application of disciplined effort, we do become stronger, we become more courageous, we become more capable, we become more formidable. And that's ultimately, I think, the foundation of what Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is going to be building for us, is a sense of deep inner strength that we're going to be able to utilize, not just for the dreams that we're going after in this moment, but all those that wind up arising from this moment as well. Now, on a personal level as well, I don't want to brush over the fact that there's likely to be interesting crises of meaning regarding the way that history is unfolding, because it's so wonky. It's going to feel like we are unanchored, because we are. When we're going through this Saturn anchor and Neptune ocean period here of them coming closer together and conjoining and then separating, it's kind of like up anchoring from where we were, going somewhere else, and then putting that anchor down again. So in that moment in between, we are a bit untethered. Things are a little bit less sure. The time frames are totally unsure when you're on the sea. So this liminal period of time may feel a bit angsty at moments. We may even wind up realizing the ways that we've bought into some false narratives that we believed were immutable, that we believed were somehow objectively true and not just based in our own culture or this moment in civilization. But I think the best way to deal with this is to put really sincere effort into understanding the truth, looking outside of those sources that have led us astray, and even honestly looking inward for a sense of deep inner truth. with this in Aries. We should be defining our truth based on our experience, and then also holding space for that to not have to be universally objective, and to recognize that other people have their experiences and their individual perspectives and perception and things like this as well. Investing some time and energy into redefining our values, our ideals, our beliefs, rather than relying upon or looking backward toward some faltering authorities during this period of time, I think is also going to be really useful. Remaining open-minded, adopting a beginner's mind toward the world. That's something I've been preaching big time for 2026, is trying to stay open-minded with all of the alignments that we're dealing with this big push into completely new territory. None of us truly know what it is that we're dealing with here. And I think the universe has a lot in mind for all of us. And so as open as we can be to what that's going to look like and what the timetable on that is going to be, I think the less resistance and frustration that we're going to feel with the changes that are occurring. And I know that this is easier said than done. I haven't mentioned it, but I was born precisely under one of the previous Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. I was born in March of '89 when there was an exact conjunction of Saturn-Neptune. So I lived this stuff. I've been through this process a bunch of times in my life. And all of this is easier said than done, but I definitely am trying to speak from some sense of my experience with it as well, of how to do it well and how to maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that I have found with it. So if in this moment we can look at everything, the world, the narratives, the beliefs, the politics of everything, quite literally, with fresh eyes, that's going to be the surest path back to a sense of comprehension and genuinely understanding things, rather than grasping onto what we have believed in the past and what has led to potentially some breakdown. Now, there may be some existing narratives here that are going to wind up winning the day, and maybe you already believe that, but maybe not. And I don't mean to challenge you on a personal level when it comes to that, but I've been through that a few times. But additionally, it doesn't hurt to just keep an open mind and recognize, especially through opening our vision to what other people are dealing with on an individual level as well, recognizing the sea change that is going on right now when it comes to what people truly believe. It's such a huge aspect of the zeitgeist that's coming up for us. Even if we are utterly proven right with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, on the other side of it, we can learn a whole lot about humanity and our place in the world and our perspectives and other people's perspectives if we can keep our eyes open to that. So let's talk about how this is a really wonderful alignment. Again, I'm biased because this is probably one of my favorite alignments that I have in my chart. But to me, Saturn conjunct Neptune is manifestation. It is bringing a dream into reality. It is alchemy. And so we will likely feel a very deep desire and be presented with very real opportunities, perhaps unbelievable, but very real opportunities to realize our dreams, to take an ideal or a vision of our future and bring it into reality. In Aries, this is going to present a need for self-sufficiency, self-belief, personal tenacity. Certainly, the vast majority of us will need to overcome some fears, some anxieties, some feelings of inadequacy, that imposter syndrome that I mentioned, as well as the tendency to disbelieve the most fantastic aspects of a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Sometimes things work out in completely insane ways with this, and it just comes through. It's a 5-year plan maybe that you have, and an opportunity to realize it within a few weeks winds up presenting itself to you. The timing will be weird here. It's not going to be all patience, patience, patience. I preach that because if we try and speed up the time frame here, we're likely to run into walls. But we may actually find that the time frame at weird moments winds up speeding up quite a bit because of the fact that Saturn is in a zone that rules fast, immediate results. So sometimes Saturn will falter in that and we will get those immediate results, but we will still need to be persistent after we get that initial boost. So I truly believe that this is the best alignment in terms of opportunity to bring a new reality into being, whether it's by accomplishing goals, overcoming personal challenges, gaining a greater sense of our strength, our courage, our capability. As long as we maintain our intention toward our dreams during this period of time, we're very likely to witness how the mundane is what's magic in the world, that we are living alchemy, recognizing the alchemy of investing energy into a goal and then transmuting that energy, that effort, into the outcome that we're desiring. This is as magical as any other ritual. This is probably the biggest lesson that I've learned from Saturn and Neptune together. And I think in Aries this time, we can even wind up alchemizing a sense of appreciation of our own accomplishments, taking pride in ourselves, believing in ourselves. The impact of that is going to be really huge. So that is something that we should be seeking for a really strong foundation. And I think it's also even going to allow for us to recognize our weaknesses without letting them restrict us or inhibit us unnecessarily, or to imagine that we can't overcome some of those weaknesses or our limitations. So this alignment is going to teach us that a lot of the blockages that we perceive to be real and that we rely upon to give us a sense of structure in our lives are not truly real. A lot of these are social constructs, and that's what Neptune reminds us of. If we're limiting ourselves based on an unreal blockage, this transit can absolutely force the liberation from that. So it can take that away without a doubt. That's the reputation that Saturn-Neptune gets on the human perceived negative side, is that sometimes it takes things away, but it's not going to take something away that's true to us, that we should be working with. And when it does that, what it's doing is creating a sense of space for us to start fresh, to renew our lives, to pursue things that are more satisfying to us, as well as creating a structure that actually will keep us safe in the future. I would absolutely recommend with this alignment writing things down that you're wanting. I think that that's a wonderful way to actively utilize this transit, is to set intentions. You may be surprised with how things start to fall in place for that, and how, even though, again, these things require some persistence, it might not be as hard or as difficult to overcome things on a personal level during this period of time than it usually is, or even going forward based on the experience of breakthrough that we have around this conjunction. I also feel like when we set our intentions in that way, this can help to enable us to feel like we're a bit more in control of the changes that this transit is bringing, especially if we are taking action steps toward our goals and actively taking stock of, taking note of, and trying to pivot away from the things that we know are not working for us. I do think that delayed gratification is going to be a really important theme here. And Saturn and Neptune, they don't offer just an easy, no effort required way through things, but they do offer immense support to those engaging with the realities of time and effort and persistence, patience and faith, perhaps most importantly, that things will work. And this is especially so when those virtues are expressed in a way that's not just to receive a specific outcome. So when we're really trying to strengthen ourselves internally and develop our own virtues and gifts, for one thing, that's pretty well guaranteed. But for another, it is through that practice that we tend to see the best, most desirable results externally as well from our efforts. So focusing on the reward of the virtue itself is something that Saturn-Neptune takes a really sympathetic eye to. So trying to strengthen and practice honesty and integrity, perspective, challenging our perspectives, taking many different perspectives, humility, flexibility, hope, courage, persistence, discipline, deliberativeness. All of that winds up feeding into wisdom, which is, again, in my view, what Saturn and Neptune most exalts. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction rewards are, in my view, the most meaningful because they offer not only a sense of deep virtue and strength of character, but also because that is precisely what we need in order to sustain our motivation and purpose to accomplish our goals. So these are the lessons that wind up sustaining us throughout our entire lives. And that ultimately, I think, is the really wonderful gift that we receive. And in Aries, this is going to be deeply personal, deeply individual, and strengthening us and our faith in ourselves in, I think, an absolutely wonderful way. But yeah, I think that's a lot of the overarching themes that I wanted to cover with this treatment of Saturn conjunct to Neptune. I'm hoping that this is less wild than I'm thinking it will be in the February-March timeframe. Maybe we can spread that craziness out a little bit, but I wouldn't be super shocked. But keep in mind, this will quiet down. As it becomes wider and wider, that conjunction, we're going to get into that rhythm. We're going to get to feel a surer and surer footing as this moves along. So we're not always going to feel kind of bereft on the high seas here with Saturn Neptune. But yeah, with all of that said, I do want to thank you all so much for spending this time with me. Again, if you don't mind giving the video a like or a hype, I would really greatly appreciate that. It helps out so much. And do consider sticking around by subscribing. I would love to have you here. There's information in the description box about personal readings as well as membership perks like weekly forecasts, monthly sessions. We are currently going through the houses right now, doing a full treatment of each of those. So if that is of interest, definitely check that out. And thank you so much to the members of this channel for your support. So thank you so much to Angel Niblock, JJ, Michelle Howell, Deborah Keel-Leavitt, Patrick McKenney, Jody, Anne-Marie, C. Rezer, Peace Out, Rachel Windholtz, Aya, Lynn Newman, Long T. Standing, The Nelson Cat Maya, Connie DiMartino, Dolly Geezy, Mango JT, B. Love, Starlingly True, Psyche Lloyd, Noah, Aquarian Antiquarian, Susan Martin, Chad W., Jonathan Mason, Adrienne K., SP, Teresa Jones, Sherry Leas, Horse Dog Dog Notebook, Nioke Beam, Farts and Chuckles, Create, Gales Tarot and Astrology, Talitha McKenzie, K from NH, Batar Music, Nancy Imhoff, Peter Carlin, Sarah M. Cap, Angela Lazaire, Travis Dandro, Jane Bevan, Helena Fisher, Tina Reynolds, Sacred Alpaca, Natasha P., Indy Loon, Linda Skull, Marnouche Shamiri, Mari Garcia, D. Fish, Ellen McCormick Martins, Black Sheep Pink Unicorn, Someone77, Attunement Tarot, Cookerzilla Joshua Owen, J.A., Carrie Affronti, Mike, Lynn Ching, Kiska Kudsentsova, Linda Osborne, Denise Gould, Many Stars, E.F., Zoe, Plamena Malanova, The Muslim Researcher, Dante Hill, Cameron Walker, Larissa F., A. Neon, Marlo Murphy, Allison Arthurson, Janelle S., Janet McCann, Gamin, CPT Alpha 12, Alina Bloomgarden, Mina Dobras, NG, Sydney, Rebecca Cortez, Mike Jonesy Boy, Ricky Dandridge, Novocaine, Brandy Williams, Allison Elliott, Mason HKW, Adya Freya Willow Raven, Psychics and Mediums, M.A. Nat Catnip, Shane V, Jesse, Aaron Paterson, Shell Hawkins, Amanda Emmons, Brenda Tucker, This Is It, My Friends, Tracy Gerdine, Sabrina Simon, J.L., Grounded Fire, Shadow and Soul Revolution, Esther Swan, Victoria Gordon, Lizzie Willow, Emily Zoe, Scarlett Sparks, Patricia Cogley, Rachel Y, Alex T, Bella, Ali Casanova, Ruby Payne, Valerie Hamilton, Elsie, Gabriel Pages, Blue Bila, Jody Gonzalez, Sunshine, Cat Alien, Nita Singh, M. Potate, Rebecca Fusetti, Anna Jordan, Roxette De La Cruz, I Hate 1988, Patricia Ewing, Sylvia C., Anya G., Yorena Martin, Jennifer Arena, Ren, Margox, Anna Cedarquist, Madcat Vlogs, Veronica Dubiel, Linda McCallum, Padme Moonflower, Jenny Tron, Joey M., B., Desiree Hamlin, Maria Paula Major, Blue Flame, Self Carry, Katie Scarlett, Mercurius Luna, Sandra Anderson, Marlena Kimber, Giselle Christine, Sasha Stargarden, Danny Baneyful, Stacy Starkey, Christy Pops MC, Cameron, Milana Rivera, Casey Rusma, Petra S., Kelly Zars, Peace Yarn and Paper, Lakshana, Mused Wellness, Hello Beyond, One of Many, Monique Bird, Pample Granite, Deb Brights, Melissa Campbell, and Charles Oganeke. Thank you all so much for your support. I really greatly appreciate it. And without any further ado, let's get into the sign by sign. All right, so for Aries, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your first house. So for you, this is fundamentally personal. It's very much about you and your view, your image of yourself and your own personal goals. So this is likely to feel like a major personal reinvention, and it is an absolute invitation to that. So with Neptune moving into this house, it's trying to release any sort of self-imposed limits or even externally imposed limits on you and who you can be and the role that you can play on your own personal goals and what you feel like you can do in this life and who you can be. So Neptune is encouraging you to go big. And then Saturn's coming through and it's saying, okay, let's make this real. Let's crystallize this into your sense of identity, into your experience of life. Let's prove this to you so that you can create more of this externally and really live in this new sense of self then. So false self-images is going to be a pretty big aspect to this here. They'll come up at different times. They'll be a whole hell of a lot louder than usual. And it should feel quite glaring when you are wearing a mask. To you, it should feel quite glaring and somewhat intolerable. So this is about getting you to a much more authentic, much more real version of yourself through shedding those false notions about who you are. Saturn and Neptune both question the assumptions of the other and wind up coming to a sense of agreement on what is a much firmer foundation once you shed away all of the unnecessary attachments. So really confronting what is it that you have attached your identity to outside of yourself or out of a sense of social expectation or obligation or pleasing others. This will force you to confront those things. Now, you'll probably get out ahead of a lot of this. You're probably already feeling pretty motivated to actively confront these things. And that is a great way to approach this, to be really, really, really intentional about it and to be clear with yourself, like to the point of probably writing this down or journaling it out. Who do you want to be? What roles do you want to play? What would your personal goals be if you were to remove all self-imposed, self-doubt based limitations that you place upon yourself? So all those attachments that make you feel safe, they might be holding you in. They probably are. And this is going to point that out so that you are kind of forced to deal with those things and to grow beyond them. So this is helping a lot with developing a sense of independence from others, from the notions, from the belief systems of others, from the narratives of others, from needing to fit into their boxes and things like this. And creating a sense of personal, inner, exclusive authority over yourself, within yourself. So calling your own shots and prioritizing your own personal goals during this time. And doing so from a place of, I wouldn't say necessarily quiet confidence, but there can be this, I would imagine that at times there may be a tendency to go impulsive with this, to almost try to overcorrect on any attachments and things like that, or to push yourself too fast, or to be kind of impatient with the process here. So I would recommend, it's not the end of the world if that happens sometimes, but try to do this in as disciplined a way in terms of peeling back the layers of what isn't you from you, layer by layer, piece by piece. Try to take stock of that as well as you're doing it. Try to put some real thought into it. And try to really internalize a lot of the wisdom that you can gain from this, because Saturn and Neptune are going to be providing a huge amount of personal wisdom to you about notions of identity. And this may even wind up putting you into a position to where you are also inspiring others to lead their own way, to go their own way, to follow their own path. So trying to delay the instant gratification of saying, okay, I'm there, I'm at the destination on February 20th, right? When this goes exact. But allow for the couple of years of process to do its work. It's going to be much more thorough that way. And there may be moments where you run into some frustrations, where you feel like you're backsliding a bit. That is perfectly fine. The overall trajectory, I'm sure, when you wind up looking back, is going to be extremely positive toward a sense of authenticity and independence, and a huge amount of courage that you're building through this time, and courage to be yourself. So again, all about crystallizing a new authentic version of yourself, a new cycle of your life, a new cycle of personal goals that you're going to be stepping into here. So that's a lot of what I have. A couple other little thoughts that are cropping up. There can be some moments of confusion. There may be moments where you just don't seem to be able to maybe see eye to eye with other people. Others may seem to really not understand where you're coming from. You may also find that there is a lot of interesting serendipitous moments where you are needing to step in and step up, like into a position of authority. Neptune is going to open up those doors. And if you are not entirely clear on what your personal goals are right now, I also wouldn't fret about that too much either, because Neptune would be more than glad to have you just open-minded about that, and it will lead you toward what will become your new set of personal goals that you're going after. Also, try not to be too shy to take little detours here and there. If something seems inspiring, if something seems quite ideal, try not to over-scrutinize it. That is how Neptune tends to lead us to much more fascinating places, is through these weird little detours that we take, where we pick up all of these wonderful little nuggets of wisdom and experience that we wind up taking with us, and that wind up serving us really well and enriching our lives. So that kind of serendipity, very likely to come through a lot. I would be willing to follow those things. But again, keep in mind that this is also working in a pretty impulsive place in Aries. So it's not so much about being rash, but rather still following your heart. And when it comes to something that you know is in your heart, try to be willing to take the time to really think it through, to plan it, to organize it, and to put one foot in front of the other in terms of putting your effort into it in a disciplined and deliberate fashion. If you are able through this to learn more deliberative action, more patience, more delayed gratification, I mean, an Aries who has that under their belt too is very formidable. So that would also just in and of itself be extremely well worth it. But yeah, really coming into a true, real sense of who you are through the coming couple of years. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Aries. So I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Taurus, we have the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction in Aries taking place in your 12th house. And this is the place of things that are hidden, that are outside of your direct control. This is the place of your subconscious and your inner world, as well as a place of isolation or solitude. A lot of our behavioral patterns and our conditioning show up in this place as well. So you're very likely to have this transit be quite quiet, surprisingly quiet, but very revealing of that which is going on within you. So any sort of unconscious patterns that you have, the conditioning that you've picked up on, all of the environmental things that you have received and taken on and internalized and created patterns from, that being revealed to you so that it can be released. This is likely to be, for the most part, pretty gentle. At times, it may feel like your inner world is quite intense, and you may feel the need to withdraw into it in order to address some of the things that are coming up, which are, again, those really deep-seated patterns and conditioning, the things that you have absorbed from the outside. Be that self-limiting beliefs, self-doubt. This can be a place where we tend to take too many sacrifices for other people. And this will be driving up your sense of compassion and your desire to be a really good influence on other people and your ability to be a really good influence on other people. But one thing I would say about this is that it will reinforce on some level the need to create boundaries around this inner world, around the subconscious. so that you feel a bit more in control and like you have some more authority over what goes on within your own emotions and within your own spirit even. So very subtle, but very impactful energies are being worked through with this transit. This is also going to look at your habits. So any sort of coping mechanisms. This can be escapist tendencies. This can be any sort of dependencies that you may have. This can be any self-sabotaging tendencies as well. So if you try to avoid certain opportunities because you're worried about whether you're going to live up to them or things like that, that can even show up in this place and would be much more apparent when that comes up with this alignment here, but also easier with Saturn in this place working with Neptune, which is showing, digging up all this stuff from the deep, basically. Saturn's able to actually get its hands in there and start to address these things and restructure the inner world such that these coping mechanisms don't wind up taking over. You are very likely to also find that you need some more solitude, some more rest during this time, and that you need to focus a bit more on well-being. And I would really recommend a lot of that too. You can be very, very, very productive in solitude, get a lot done. We tend to downplay the productivity and the kind of creative potential that inner work actually carries. Like how productive it actually is when we do inner work. It's absolutely huge because it impacts all of the outer work that we're going to be doing, right? It helps to make that a lot more efficient and more capable. So I wouldn't be shy to prioritize your inner world, your subconscious, your emotions, your spirit, your psyche, looking at all of this and really trying to clear it out, trying to start fresh as much as you possibly can and remove any sort of illusions that are there, any negative patterns or things like that. Spiritual discipline may also wind up becoming quite important here. If you are utilizing some spiritual practices to help with some of this inner work or any sort of energetic work, being really disciplined about this is going to help a lot. You're likely to be taking this all a lot more seriously and really carving out time to prioritize that. It would be a great time if you're wanting to kick off a spiritual kind of career or you're wanting to reinforce something like that. Saturn and Neptune in the 12th is going to help with that kind of thing. It's also going to call on you to face some things that you may try to hide from yourself, that you may try to avoid, that you may have swept under the rug. This is very much about sweeping everything out from under the rug and really looking at it, but making time for it and maybe lowering the pressure in some of the other parts of your life if you can, to have some more quiet time to be able to do that. Because ultimately what this is about is, like I said, it's a very quiet kind of a transit generally. A lot of this is going to be under the surface. It's going to be stuff you're working on your own that other people probably won't even be aware of, though you might not be around quite as much and they might point that out. But this inner restructuring and trying to shore up your own internal foundation and your own sense of what's going on within you and your sense of control over what's going on within you. The processing of emotion, the processing of thought, and so forth. But it's setting you up for Saturn to then transit through your first house, where you're going to be taking on a much more overt role. You're going to be taking very seriously then your personal goals out in the world as well. But you're going to be much better prepared for that with Saturn coming through the 12th house and restructuring the inner world such that when you are trying to project that externally in a couple of years, that you're able to do so from a place that is much more assured. So yeah, huge amount of spiritual inner work going on over the coming couple of years. At times it'll be emotional, but it should be incredibly well worth it. And hopefully you come out of this transit feeling quite refreshed. Neptune's going to remain there for quite some time, but this place should feel pretty organized and settled by the time that Saturn moves on. So yeah, I hope this treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Gemini, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your 11th house. So this is the house of your social connections, your social aspirations, the groups that you belong to, that you identify with, the kind of lifestyle networks that you're wanting to run in, that you feel connected to. that you feel in alignment with and that are supportive of you and you supportive of them. So there are a lot of friendships as well as communities that we can see in this house, and you're likely to see some shakeups there. Now, this could just be realignments, but it can also show up as feeling a bit dissatisfied, feeling like you're not quite aligned with the people that you're connected to, feeling a bit disillusioned about your connection or about your sense of belonging or about your ability to be really authentic with those around you, and possibly, therefore, even a bit disappointed in some of the people that you're connected with. Now, this is about getting you connected with people where there is that mutual support and that mutual understanding and that sense of belonging. But sometimes that has to come through shifting out of some connections that we're already tied into. One of the big reasons for this could be taking on some sense of authority or leading by example or trying to inspire and influence certain groups of people. And therefore your role and your connection to and your prioritization of different groups shifting as well. You may even find yourself just not really wanting to identify with groups anymore, but rather to create your own sense of identity that's really rooted just deeply in yourself and your own personal aspirations. And then if that's compatible with other people, then great. But if not really worrying about trying to fit in with something or trying to hold up the mantle of some specific group. This can absolutely have you like paving your own path in such a way where others may wind up following as well. You may be really creating a wonderful example about independence for other people. You have Aries in the 11th house, so that's just reinforcing that natal promise of really desiring not to be a follower. And if you found yourself doing so in order to fit in at all in life or in recent years, this is going to make that very apparent, and it will create some sense of disillusionment around that in order to reorient you. With Neptune here, this is going to be broadening your horizons when it comes to those that you're connecting with as well. This can also have you connecting to Neptunian types of people, which are very idealistic and philosophical in nature. So this can, without a doubt, be like social causes that you're getting involved in, groups that are oriented around a kind of community or supporting people who need support or that believe in some specific thing and are pushing that, basically. People who are very willing to make sacrifices for their sense of belief or making sacrifices for the greater good or for society. And you may find yourself organizing those people or their activities, or again, just in some kind of a leadership role in this. And you may even be building some kind of a network around yourself or building up collaboration around a community that you're raising up from scratch as well. So if there is something that you really strongly believe in, but it's not very present yet in your community, say mutual aid or some specific cause, there's probably people around you that believe in similar things or even online, but it may just take someone stepping up and being the leader and creating that and organizing that. And Saturn and Neptune in your 11th house could really have you filling that role very well too. This is about building your connections with society and social groups, including like colleagues and networking around your career that feel more meaningful, that feel more supportive, that feel more aligned. So not just connecting with colleagues out of a sense of obligation or a sense of opportunity, though there will be opportunities available here through those connections, but rather doing so in a way that, again, is mutually supportive. You may even find yourself, especially if there's been any disillusionment recently, or if there's any that winds up cropping up, connecting with some new meaningful cause or effort or activity that winds up inspiring you again, that winds up stirring up your personal aspirations again, and finding a real sense of purpose through that as well. And therefore being able to redefine what you're setting out to accomplish or what you're aspiring to here. Neptune in this place encourages releasing any self-imposed limits. So when it comes to what you're reaching for, your personal goals, the status that you're wanting to create for yourself, the impact that you're wanting to have on society. Releasing those limitations, asking yourself, what would be really ideal for me in this area of my life? What is it that I'm really genuinely wanting to reach for? And make a note of that. Set some intentions around that. Start taking some steps toward that. And you might be really, really, really surprised as to how much this is willing to help to push you in the right direction and create something that you might not have even reached for previous. But again, a lot of this does take place after some sense of disillusionment, where Saturn and Neptune challenge each other's notions of what they believe in, what is just kind of taken for granted. Finally, one last thing that I would say with this is that social expectations can come through the 11th house as well. And so another thing that this could be utilized for very effectively would be releasing some inhibitions, or again, those notions that you need to satisfy some external expectation of you, but rather being able to really authentically represent yourself and be truly yourself out in society, get support for that, and then inspire others to also honor the ways in which they are unique as well. But that also does require confronting and removing some illusions around people-pleasing tendencies, or again, inhibitions, things like this. So worrying less about what people think. It's probably not going to be the easiest thing with Saturn and Neptune in this house, but it will open you up to a lot more opportunity as well, especially self-created opportunities. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. So I really hope this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Cancer, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your 10th house. And this is the house of your public life, your reputation, your role, your position, your ambitions. So if you are following a traditional career path, this usually has a lot to do with your career. But otherwise, it can have to do with your sense of achievement and what you're setting out to create of your life out in the world. So this is a very interesting alignment. Neptune moving into this house is going to encourage you to look off the beaten path, to try not to limit yourself too much in terms of what you think you can achieve or what your ambitions are, to remove a lot of those limits. And then with Saturn coming through, this is going to help to take the steps necessary to crystallize that into your life, whatever it is that you're wanting to reach for, what your ambitions truly are, when you remove any self-imposed limits from those. So naturally, this can have you questioning your public role, questioning the path that you're on, and whether it's really for you, whether it is still satisfactory, still something that really resonates with you, or if you feel like there's something else that you're wanting to pursue that has a lot more personal meaning for you. So while there's questioning around your career and everything, it's about what would I go after if I didn't impose these limits on myself. Now, it's not necessarily saying leap before you look or just switch your trajectory suddenly. There is a lot of effort thinking things through, being very responsible, trying not to be too rash or impulsive, that helps a lot with structuring this area of your life in a way that's better suited. But with that said, there may also be moments that seem to increase the disillusionment. So if you are in a position that you're not loving the most, that could feel more and more restrictive. Like you may be more and more aware of the fact that you're not liking it, such that that spurs you to go your own way, to maybe even follow an independent path with Aries in this house for you. You may be wanting to establish a career based purely on your own self, like your own business, or you may want to go into freelancing or something like this. But there may be events as well that wind up cropping up that cause some frustration, or that even push you out of a specific role so that you're more willing to take the steps that you're needing to take in order to get yourself on what feels like a better track for you. What's interesting too about this alignment is I think it's also going to have you looking at your own sense of authority differently. So what you are capable of, rather than looking to others for guidance finding that within, finding that kind of based within your own values, your own principles, and finding ways to bring that more into your daily life, basically, and your goals. A job that pays well, but that doesn't really feel right is going to feel less tolerable during this period of time. And there's reasons for that. Neptune is usually trying to get us to shift our direction a bit into something better. So the authority figures or systems that you're working within are likely to have less and less credibility for you, and therefore to cause you to think through, what do you actually respect? What do you actually look toward for guidance? And so when you are leading others, doing so with a really keen eye on your own integrity, the value of your path, and the value of your influence. If you are in an authority position already, this will also have you thinking that through a whole lot. Maybe softening up some edges, leading by example, inspiring others, especially like leading through inspiring people, being able to get people on the same page and work together more smoothly with Neptune here, and yet to do so still with that Saturnian integrity. So ultimately, this is opening up a new cycle when it comes to your reputation that's going to be shifting and changing during this couple of years that you have these both in this house. And you may get some clarity about the direction that you're wanting to push that in closer to February 20th when it goes exact. One thing I will say with this is that it may also really increase visibility. So that's another reason why integrity is going to be really important, because of how much this is impacting specifically your reputation. But ultimately, this is about redefining success, authority, your path on your own terms. And so that this is all much more in alignment with your personal value system, your own personal beliefs, and how you ideally see your future. So yeah, that is a lot of what I have for you. A couple little things that I would just throw out here. You may find that you're a bit confused by people in positions of authority. You may find that you're needing to establish some real boundaries there as well with Saturn and Neptune in this place. You may find that there's a push-pull, like a stop-go that you are experiencing in your career. You may feel like you gain and then lose and then gain clarity. If you check in on that process, I would imagine that what you'll notice is that you are on the whole gaining a huge amount of clarity about the direction that you're wanting to push your life in and how to get there, like what all of the different steps are going to be. But that doesn't make it any less frustrating to sometimes run into a little bit of confusion or fog or not quite knowing which step to take. You may even feel really clear on your goals, but not clear on the steps. And that I would also try to give it some time and really try and set intentions, writing things down that you're wanting. I said it in the last video, and I've been trying to say, I'm a Gemini rising. So all of the outer planet transits that you guys are about to come into, I'm just basically coming out of, just in a different sign. And this has been a really wonderfully impactful transit for me personally. So I can't reiterate enough to not fear it, but definitely heed it, because it has a huge amount of wisdom and it's going to have its own ideas of which way to push things. And you might not have the level of faith in yourself, in your ability to accomplish the ambitions that this is going to set you on the path to wind up accomplishing. So that's why it's really important when Neptune is in the 10th house, try not to just stick to the tried and true way. This is about paving your own path. And it's also about removing any notions of, oh, I can't do that, or I can't reach for that. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Cancer. So I do hope that this treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Leo, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your 9th house. And this is quite a lovely house, but it's going to be interesting to have Saturn and Neptune there. This is a house that has a lot to do with your worldview, your belief systems, how you view your place in the world and your possibilities and your potential in the world, because this is a place of personal growth and the development and expansion of your horizons as well, either through direct experience or through learning. This is also a place of disseminating your knowledge, your ideas, a place of philosophy and higher learning, as well as quite literally travel. So what I love about this, and what feels very reinforcing about this, is that as Neptune is moving into this ninth house, what it's saying to your ninth house, which is how it is that you view what your potential is, it's coming in and it's preaching limitlessness. So it's preaching to your ninth house, hey, there are no limits to your potential. You can do what you want. You can grow into who you want to be. And try not to focus on placing any undue notions of that you can't reach for something, on what you're willing to reach for in life. So it's coming through and really encouraging personal growth and massive, massive expansion of your horizons. And then Saturn is coming through and helping to crystallize that into reality. So what are the action steps then to getting yourself to where you're wanting to reach for? Saturn helps with making that very real and not going off on too many little Neptunian detours, but rather hopefully being able to stay focused, eyes on the prize of the big dreams that you have for yourself and the place that you're wanting to occupy in the world, the impact that you're wanting to have on the world as well. So dissolving personal limits is going to be fundamental to this, and I really love that aspect of it. If you are in publishing, if you are a teacher, if you have wanted to travel for some time, if you've wanted to have some really transcendent spiritual experiences, if you have been reaching for a philosophy that really feels like it aligns with you, this is going to be, again, very helpful for bringing that into your life in a very real way. And so any sort of visions that you have of the future that you're wanting, the experiences that you're wanting to have, especially those that you have thought at some point in your life, oh, that's impossible or that's too much to ask for, that can absolutely be had. And you might be surprised as to how much of that you're able to create for yourself within the coming couple of years that Saturn's going to be there in that ninth house with Neptune. And you may get a lot of clarity around February about what it is that you're wanting to go after here. So if there are some intentions that you would love to set, I would be doing maybe like manifestation journaling and then take some steps towards those things. You might be surprised as to how with Saturn and Neptune, it can throw some obstacles in our way if it wants to show us to work around those kinds of things or how to overcome certain things. But weirdly enough, it can also really pave a path for us and make going after something and making it real somewhat easier. As long as we're willing to put in the effort, it gets a lot of the nonsense limitations kind of out of the way. So I would really encourage reaching high with this, especially because this is kind of an aside, but you're also going to have Jupiter coming into your first house later in the year as well. And that's also going to help with personal growth and personal expansion, opportunities opening up to you to really go after your own personal goals. Now, when it comes to your belief system as well, one thing we tend to see in the world with Saturn and Neptune is this kind of dissolving of old narratives about the world and how it works. All of the kind of common sense, this is just how we do things, notions that we run with for long periods of time in society, and periodically wind up breaking down, and then we need to build new narratives about why society functions the way that it does. That's kind of reinforced for you here. It may go a bit more esoteric, it may go a bit more spiritual, but worldview can definitely be impacted here too. So you may fundamentally be working from scratch and maybe even intentionally of, I don't really believe in these things that I've held for a while anymore. And so let's just start over. Let's look for what feels really aligned at this point in life. And that would be a really wonderful place to work from, is like beginner's mind, basically, because this is a completely new cycle when it comes to your belief systems. And it's going to come out of a lot of scrutiny, a lot of questioning, a lot of really thinking things through. This is going to encourage a lot of really deep thought. If you are already in school, in university, if you are on a specific path, basically, in life, when it comes to where your horizons seem to lie, those may shift and change during this time. So this could even due to a sense of disillusionment with that destination and not wanting to reach for that thing anymore, but rather wanting to maybe reach a little bit higher, or to something that feels better aligned at this point in your life, or that feels truer, or that feels like the future of it is more clear for you. So this could even look like changing majors or going into a new field. If you are already a teacher, this would also speak to stepping into a greater sense of authority and impact and influence in your teaching. If you publish at all, videos, writing, anything like that, this is also going to increase the influence of that quite a bit and have you take that very, very, very seriously too. You may also find yourself just really fundamentally inspired to push your limits, to push yourself into new arenas or new realms, new places, and explore life more fully and enrich your life through that experience. So this could be a wanderlust that winds up cropping up, a real inspiration to write and to publish, to study philosophy, spirituality, to answer big questions for yourself. And you're likely to be really disciplined along all of these lines as well. Again, taking this all super, super seriously, especially if there are any aspects of learning or teaching or disseminating that information to others as well, because then that's also reflective of the mark that you're making on the world, which you'll also be taking very seriously through this time. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I have for you. If you do go traveling or you do take courses, if there are any legal considerations that wind up coming up for you, there may at times be some lack of clarity, some confusion, weird timing, delays in timing. There may be serendipitous opportunities that seem to present themselves to you out of nowhere. Don't expect for the timeline to just be normal here at all, is basically what I'm getting at. And don't expect immediate clarity, but be willing to have a lot of faith in yourself and your mind to make the types of decisions that are going to foster a sense of personal growth through this period of time as well. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Leo. It's quite a lovely transit, so I hope that it treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Virgo, we have the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction in Aries taking place in your 8th house. And this is a pretty complex house. This has a huge amount to do with the dependencies that we build with others. There's a lot to do here about overt and more subtle agreements and contracts that we establish with other people, karmic ties, emotional bonds, a lot of the underlying impact that other people can have and our connections to other people can have show up in this house as well. And I will just say, I have natally a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, and it's natally in my 8th house. So I'm quite familiar with this energy. It is some of the more complicated ways to be dealing with this, but it is incredibly rewarding. So I will try to relate some of that to you from my own experience as well. But this is going to encourage a lot notions of self-sufficiency. So being able to depend on yourself, not needing to depend upon others. There may have been recently some disillusionment with regard to your connection with other people, your belief in other people. You may have felt kind of dependent, like you weren't able to make the moves that you were wanting to make due to some of your ties with other people as well. And if there have been any material dependency aspects of that, even if it's someone who's dependent upon you, that is entirely open to restructuring through this period of time. And that's something that Saturn-Neptune would really encourage. And then also looking at the energetic dependencies. Who has what effect on you, your energy, your life, your experience of things, your sense of self, your resilience, who builds you up and who seems to maybe encourage a sense of vulnerability. So looking at those things really honestly is going to be super helpful on the front end of this. What this is ultimately going to wind up coming back around to, though, is to not let some disappointments and disillusionments when it comes to your interconnection, your interdependency with other people, to shut down that ability to be vulnerable, that ability to trust other people entirely. So it's not always going to look the same when you get into deep bonds with people. But where that has been unhealthy, this is going to encourage addressing that, either through cutting some of those ties, maybe even striking out on your own, maybe even proving to yourself that you're able to do things without any sort of dependencies upon other people for the most part, or through restructuring those connections and what that energy exchange looks like, what is acceptable in terms of energy exchange, what you are willing to accept, what your expectations and standards for other people's behavior is, and where your boundaries lie. So that will test some of your close bonds. Some of them will stand up to that, will stand through that process, and some of them are likely to be released. And again, it's primarily those who are undermining your sense of your ability to rely on yourself and your self-trust that are most likely to get the axe here. That's what's really sensitive about the 8th house. And I want to come back around to these notions of what you expect and what you're wanting basically out of your connections with other people, what you want for interdependent connections to look like in your life. Neptune releases limits. It says, if you want something, you can have it. You should not place unnecessary rules or restrictions on these things, right? So it's encouraging you to go after the kinds of bonds that you're wanting in your life. And then Saturn is coming through and it is encouraging you to overcome some of the personal obstacles, to face any sort of fears around trust or control, to prove to yourself your own resilience and self-reliance and self-trust so that you are able to establish and crystallize within your life the kind of interdependent connections that you're really looking for. I hope that makes sense, but it's like establishing this sense of strength within yourself, the ability to be vulnerable to yourself, the ability to trust in yourself, to respond to any given situation in other people. Since we can't control other people, establishing that firm foundation within yourself is going to be really helpful to being able to open those doors a bit more, to let those guards down a bit more with other people. So there's this deep psychological transformation available around notions of vulnerability and resilience. If you let your guard down and someone turns out to be jerky or not trustworthy, you'll be okay. But oftentimes that can trigger our sense of fight or flight. And sometimes we allow for this to develop to such a point that we wind up fundamentally dependent upon someone who's really, really not good, right? So this is about being able to suss out where are the red flags as soon as possible, and then responding appropriately by either raising the walls or removing that kind of energy from your life altogether. But it really does all come down to what are the choices that you're making about the ties that you're establishing with people and trying to establish those on a firmer foundation going forward here. You've had Saturn and Neptune in your 7th house for a little while. And so I would imagine that there's been a lot of lessons along those lines. And now with the conjunction going exact and then Saturn moving forward from Neptune, it's basically looking at what are you really wanting in this area now, even if it's at this stage in your life to not really have many dependencies at all on other people and to really prove to yourself that you're able to stand on your own 2 feet. This can certainly establish that foundation for you as well. But yeah, ultimately, this is going to come down to notions of integrity within shared resources, be those your emotional ties or financial ties. Trying not to control other people through those and trying not to be controlled through those from other people as well. This conjunction is also likely to make you really want to take care of any sort of debts that you may have, any outstanding loans or things like this, to really pay things off and no longer have that on your back. Because that itself, of course, can also feel like an undue control that something outside of you has over you as well. So really trying to shut that down wherever that is in your life. And ultimately, now moving forward, claiming for yourself a greater sense of personal control over how your experience of your connections with other people go and other entities go. So with all of those learned lessons, especially if you have any interest or you've been digging into psychology, this is going to help a lot with understanding how you tick, how other people tick as well, understanding what's healthy and what's not, and then being able to apply that wisdom and build those better connections so that you do have a life that is shared with very trustworthy people around you. But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I have for you, Virgo. So I do hope that this treats you super well. If it is any consolation, like I said, I have this natally. It's not the easiest kind of an energy to work with, but it's very well worth it. And ultimately, it's probably one of my favorite alignments that I have. So again, I do hope it treats you well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Libra, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your 7th house. And this is the house of partnerships, those who are partners to you, those outside of you, how you relate to people. We can sometimes see agreements and contracts and things like that show up in this house as well. But for the most part, it's our relationships. So if this has been an area that has been disillusioning or disappointing at all recently, Saturn and Neptune here are excellent for setting intentions to make big changes here. Neptune's going to come in and it's going to say, there's no reason to be doing things the way that they've been done. There's no rules, there's no restrictions, there's no limitations on what you could have in this area of life. Saturn's going to come through and it's going to support that message, make it a little bit more real, and then help you to establish and concretize that, crystallize that within your life. So you can have what you want. That's the big lesson of Saturn and Neptune. But it does take some effort, and it does take creating some boundaries and prioritization of these things to have what you want. If you're coming into this, which I don't necessarily expect that you are, but if you're coming into this just totally on an even keel when it comes to your partnerships and relationships, I would be very surprised by that, particularly because we had a little blip of Saturn and Neptune in the 7th in Aries last summer. And so you've already gotten a little bit of a vision of this, but this can still present some illusions that you may have been holding in relationships or that others may have been creating about themselves to you or for you to believe about them. So the veils that other people put on, the masks that other people wear are a major aspect of this alignment here. And they usually don't survive that. Now, that's fine. That doesn't mean that the relationship has to break down, but the illusion tends to get worn away when Saturn and Neptune are here, questioning each other's notions. Neptune is questioning the restrictions, the rules, the structure of Saturn and wearing away at it. And then Saturn is questioning the realism of the kind of romanticized vision that Neptune can carry. Now, they can get on the same page once they've worn down those illusions, once those illusions have been gotten rid of. Then Saturn is perfectly willing to put a lot of effort and help us to put a lot of effort into creating something that feels a lot more aligned and that feels a lot more purposeful and meaningful in our lives. So there's going to be a bit of both of that. There's a balance of, there will be some disillusionment. Try not to get caught up in the disappointment stage of that. Just because some people have been disappointing doesn't mean that everyone will be. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep trying to establish partnerships and relationships that are meaningful. If, for instance, there's been a lot or there are a lot that you're needing to release due to this even. Also, just because there's been illusions within a specific connection also doesn't mean that that has to be scrapped fully either. There can be this reestablishment or restructuring of some of your partnerships on firmer ground as well. Again, it's always those illusions that need to be dealt with initially in order to build something more sound. So when it comes to your commitments, when it comes to how others are presenting themselves and how honest that is, there's going to be a lot of shuffling that around, redefinition along those lines. You may be prioritizing certain qualities over others now going forward. This can help a huge amount with establishing boundaries. So if you have a tendency to overgive in your connections, this will point that out. So there may be an event that happens that turns the volume up on that, such that you can't avoid something, you can't avoid seeing something, or you can't unsee, okay, I've got some boundary issues, I'm overgiving here. I maybe should not have taken that person at their word. Like I should have known kinds of moments. And I hate to say that because I have definitely had some of those of my own, but they always come with a silver lining. They always come with greater wisdom when we're dealing with Saturn and Neptune together. And they come with the most valuable lesson of all in partnerships, which is you are worthy of boundaries. And just because you have boundaries doesn't mean that, for instance, you're going to be left alone, or that you're going to have to put your walls up so high that people can't get in, and that you can't have these wonderful experiences with people, and that you can't romanticize or idealize people a bit. Just making sure that you're keeping that in check, and that you are reality checking those things basically here and there. Also, if you need to say no, like if establishing boundaries has been difficult because you don't like to have conflict or you don't like to say no, this is also going to be really helpful to that end as well, of marking out what do you really want in your connections and what kinds of partnerships are you wanting to build with people. This is going to be spurring a lot of confidence and courage to be really authentic and honest about that, and to not overvalue a connection that isn't even necessarily meeting that where it's at, right? This will also be quite helpful in terms of, again, those kind of masks that people wear, or the identities of partners, the expectations of partners. This will help a lot to make that visible as to what's going on there, where others end and you begin. And it can then help not only with establishing boundaries, but in individuating from other people as well. So allowing yourself to be yourself and not just to meet the standards of other people, or to not just be the version of yourself that you feel like other people are comfortable with. And, you know, I know this isn't easy stuff necessarily. There's a lot of then concern about losing people or being left alone, you know, all of these kinds of things, these fears that our minds can tell us at times. But if you do this, if you're really authentic with people, if you stick up for yourself, if you establish those boundaries, if you say no more when you're wanting to say no, not just for the sake of it, of course, but when you really have a boundary that you're needing to assert with someone, when you can't just give and take care of other people, especially those who aren't returning that favor. But when you're really honest with yourself about what you want and with others about what you want, that's what helps this to establish those ideal connections, which are more honest and sustainable connections and partnerships that are much more supportive, much more sound, and have a stronger foundation to them. That's why these two are great when they wear away at each other, is there's a shoddy foundation that they're able to see with each other. There's all sorts of assumptions there. There's all sorts of, you know, gaps that are just kind of brushed over, typically by these two, that they're each able to see about each other. And by pulling away at the weak foundation, that's what enables that building something really solid going forward. So this can actually help to deepen your commitment with some partners. But of course, that can only happen if you're really honest with them, and if they're really honest with you too. So there's going to be some reality checks in your connections for sure. Some of them will pass though, and if they do, they're probably with you for the long haul. Some will dissolve, and I would recommend, instead of focusing on the disappointment and the frustration with those people, especially if someone's dropped the ball or someone hasn't been fully honest or whatever, embrace the lesson. That is a beautiful, wonderful thing that Saturn-Neptune offers us, and I think we can be a little bit ungrateful for at times, is really valuable lessons. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Libra, when it comes to this transit. So I do hope that it treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Scorpio, we have the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction in Aries taking place in your 6th house. And this is the house of basically your mundane life, your daily routines, habits, the things you have to do, and acute health considerations also show up in this house. So this can quite literally present as releasing some sort of dissatisfying work situation. That would not be at all altogether shocking to see. letting go of a workplace, letting go of a role or a position. That may be for sure by choice due to a sense of disillusionment. You may have felt that there's been some stringing along within a work situation or just not being satisfied, maybe decreasingly satisfied with the sense of purpose that you're deriving from that work as well. And you may just feel like less and less aligned with it. So you may be choosing yourself to do something like that. This would encourage that kind of thing in terms of not necessarily leaping before you look, but allowing for Neptune to open up the possibilities, to remove the limits from this area of your life in terms of how your work life can look, and then setting that intention to go after that and to pursue that with Saturn in this place as well. So if you are fundamentally dissatisfied with your work, for one thing, you can push through with Saturn here. There can even be a bit of a stubbornness to that Saturn of not giving up on something. But this can also present opportunities as in kind of taking something that you don't want away so that you're forced to build something new from that. So again, this is mostly going to be the case if you are not aligned with your working life. And I wouldn't fret too much if you do feel that your work life is pretty good. In that case, it's going to be calling into question some of your habits. So if you overwork, if you have poor boundaries within your working life, if you tend to get delegated to and you don't say no quite as much as maybe you should, either to clients or bosses or, coworkers, do you tend to assume if you want something to get done right, you have to do it yourself? Like there's an over delegation to oneself that can come up here as an unhealthy habit that I would not be surprised to see you presented with during this time. You may even be surprised with how much you find yourself taking on as a result of this transit even, and then needing to readjust that partway through as well. And in that case, it's just presenting you with a lesson that's going to serve you well down the road too. Restructuring your work routines and habits. This can be organizationally. This can be trying to work more independently, more on your own, working from home more. This could even be encouraging you to go independent as well. And that may be something that you are pursuing on the side initially. That may be one of those like Neptune giving Saturn some marching orders of, hey, if there's no limits here, maybe I want to work for myself. And then putting in that doubling down effort that Saturn can bring to the table, like I was saying, where it'll get stuff done for sure. It's not going to stop. If it requires an increase in your workload to set something up on the side, that may be also something that you are doing during this period of time and trying to establish that before taking that leap. These two together in the sixth house isn't necessarily going to love taking orders from a boss. It is very independent. Again, it can be pretty hard-headed. So that may even be a major motivational factor when it comes to going off on your own and doing things your way. Or even just, we can be really dissatisfied with the lower level of quality that is sometimes expected, like in a corporation or something like this, than what we would really love to pour into our work for the sake of doing a really wonderful quality job that may take a little bit longer. That could even be the kind of thing where you're wanting to go off on your own and fully delegate the whole thing to yourself. You may really want to do that. Now, again, this can help you with that, but there is a risk of burnout with this too. And that will always come with helpful lessons, with silver linings, with some wisdom of where your limits are genuinely, because you are still a human being. That Neptune may encourage you to think otherwise, but we do only have so much energy. So there's going to be moments of burnout, quite certainly, with this alignment here. Part of it from putting a lot of effort into truly inspired work and work that feels really meaningful to you. But it can also come from burning the candle at both ends. So you may have someone around you that you feel you need to help, and you may really want to help people as well. This is a service-oriented house too. And so you may just have a lot on your plate in terms of a sense of professional obligations, but also personal responsibilities. And they may increase simultaneously at some points here and there. And that can also wind up leading into overstretching your energy. So this is definitely not a great time to be something of a martyr when it comes to your effort. If you don't need to take something on, it might be best not to. Now, I don't mean half-ass your work, because Saturn does like to see really good effort, but if it's not your responsibility, try not to take it on as an obligation. That's one thing that the sixth house can do, is again, take on too many obligations or assume that things are our obligation, and can become a bit of a martyr around that kind of thing. And usually that does lead to a sense of disillusionment and disappointment, which is one of the avenues to wisdom that Saturn and Neptune together tend to deal in quite a bit, is by disillusioning us with something that is false. And martyrdom typically is in our own lives. But yeah, ultimately, this is about creating a deeper sense of purpose within your daily routines, realigning that, creating a new daily life, creating an entirely different kind of a routine that feels more aligned. So again, this isn't just within the workplace. This is also like, where do you go shopping for food and when? And do you go to the gym? Do you want to, or do you not want to? Do you want to establish some meditation practice? Is there some well-being aspects of life that you're wanting to prioritize more? This is also going to be encouraging that too. So as I mentioned, this is a place of acute health considerations, and being disciplined about that and following up on any sort of symptoms, trying to stay on top of wellness, taking your vitamins, minerals, trying to have a reasonably healthy diet and some kind of activity that, again, feels purpose-driven. This isn't just, unless you're really into exercise, I can't rule that out, but this isn't just about doing that for the sake of doing it, but can you make it meaningful? So this isn't just about getting on the treadmill. This could be about taking up a new hobby of hiking or something like this. So what's really sustainable when it comes to your health practices? Keeping in mind the joy aspect that Neptune really values, and making sure that there's a little bit of magic in your routine every day, that there's a little bit of wonder there. That's also going to be just as important as making sure that you are checking all of the boxes off your list. Now, other than that, I will just throw out here, I have seen it time and time again that Neptune transits through the sixth and Neptune natally in the sixth. In almost every case, there's something that goes on with the health that is a bit difficult to get your finger on, to get doctors to really see. There are things that tend to be not quite textbook. So again, I would recommend, like crazy, taking care of your immune system that is much more porous and open to, like, receptive to potential problems with Neptune in this house. You do what's good for you, but zinc and D2 or D3 and K2 have been very, very, very helpful to me. And if you intuitively feel that there's something off, and yet you're not getting straight answers from a doctor, I would recommend getting second opinions with that Neptune there, and maybe checking out some alternative health practitioners, because that Neptune is something that they are more likely to pick up on than just, people going by textbook. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So I hope that this is a really welcome new cycle and a shakeup to your daily routine. I hope it treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction in Aries taking place in your fifth house. And this is the place of your creative spirit, your expression. This is the place of your children, the children around you, the childlike aspects of you, your pleasures, joys, hobbies, interests, what you love, basically. This is fundamentally a house of your heart and what lights you up. So it's going to be wonderful to spend time thinking about that. Creatively, this is going to be a very interesting alignment. If you are a creative type at all, there's going to be, say, maybe kind of ups and downs when it comes to this from the perspective of a person that doesn't ever like to run into blockages or obstacles or things like that. Those may be thrown up here and there, but when we're dealing with Neptune, there aren't real limits to possibility. And so it's not that the little obstacles and things, maybe little creative blockages that wind up arising during this time are to stop you. They're to make you more resilient through needing to look at something in different ways, needing to approach it differently, needing to find those workarounds and things like this. So if there is a reshuffle in your creative pursuits, in what gives you pleasure and what brings you joy, and there's any tinge of disillusionment that goes along with that, try not to stay in the place of disappointment for too long, but really take it as an invitation to start a new cycle that is truer to you and that comes from a place of gained wisdom from the past about what, again, truly lights you up. So there may be some illusions about what you truly want that wind up dissolving through this period of time. You may be releasing some things that you've been pursuing, be it friendships, romantic partnerships, creative interests, hobbies, mediums if you were a creative type. So if and when that's the case, remember that it's a major invitation to pivot, to do something that is truer to yourself. Now, in the process, you may be questioning your creative identity. And I mean that in the sense of what kind of energy do you want to create in the world, but also, again, what are your interests, etc. There may be some interesting boundary things that come up with this. So you may identify at this point as wanting to be really kind and nice to people and supportive to people. But if you have run into several people in a row that have encouraged a sense of inhibition or that you are needing to please them or meet their expectations, things like this, can become very disillusioning and very disappointing and can wind up then calling into question whether you really want for that to be your identity or if you want to pivot toward a greater focus on what makes you feel good. And that in and of itself is some boundary work. And that's one thing that comes up with Saturn and Neptune as well. So there may be some notions of boundaries within those connections around you, and especially anyone who creates a sense of inhibition for you or who makes you feel judged in your expression of your true self. This is also going to be deeply encouraging you to express yourself truly and authentically, to overcome inhibitions. And it will turn the volume up on that if it needs to, in order to get your attention and to instill that courage and to push you to have that courage. Maybe this has to do with putting yourself out there in a way that is a little bit scary. It's a lot easier to try to people please others and avoid some sense of criticism, or to have a false self criticized by people who are just, malcontents and going to complain either way. But it does take a lot of courage to really be authentic. And that's one thing that this is going to be rewarding a lot and helping you to do a lot. And you can put that effort in and help that process as well by pursuing, again, that sense of authentic joy. What really makes you feel good, not just what are people wanting to see from you. So not just performing for others, not just putting out there what you think other people want to see, not creating with the sense of the audience or the judge, over your shoulder, but really just showing up as yourself. If you do any inspired work, or again, this can have to do with just your pleasures and what lights you up. If you've been struggling a bit with inspiration, or if you wind up struggling somewhat with inspiration, with really enjoying the things that have lit you up in the past, this can be, again, not saying don't do that, but maybe trying to instill a sense of discipline around that. And would you do this thing that you love, even if it were somewhat more difficult in this or that kind of a way? So try not to look at all obstacles or things that you have to overcome as red lights. But again, maybe come back to these questions of, do I really love this? And that's going to answer a lot of the questions that Saturn and Neptune will pose over the coming couple of years. And it's also going to be, again, Neptune's going to be encouraging you to feel like there are not limits placed on what you love. And Saturn's going to help to pave all of the paths that need to be in order to connect you with that. So if you're feeling a little bit bereft currently, this is going to help quite a bit with that. Also with prioritizing joy. If things have gotten a little bit dry recently, this is going to help with that as well. Finally, this is also a place of creativity as in children. So if you have children, this is going to be restructuring those relationships, They may be reaching a specific milestone in their maturation process that shifts the balance of your relationship. They may be a little bit more independent, going off on their own more, but this can also deepen those connections too. And I would really recommend a huge amount of authenticity and being real with your children, not in a jerky way, but in the sense of trying to build a deeper understanding with them of you and your needs and them and their needs. And if there are any matters of inner child work that need to be done, those may have been presented over the past couple of years with Saturn and Neptune going through your fourth house. This continues to present opportunities to address those things, but this is going to be less about emotional baggage and more about letting yourself be free, releasing any sort of restrictions upon yourself that you may have inherited, again, in terms of inhibitions and things like this. So allowing yourself to have fun, to not just be productive, making time for that, prioritizing that, not feeling guilty or shameful or anything like that about your joy and pursuing that. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Capricorn, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your fourth house. This has to do with your home and family primarily. This can also speak to your private life and your emotional core or your emotional foundations. So there's likely to be a lot of restructuring in this area of your life, your private life or your home life, your family life. And if that's something that you're aiming for, this would be great to set intentions around, to really try to vision out how you're wanting for your private life, your home to look, your family relations to be, and then set out to accomplish that, because that's going to help Neptune to be clearer about what you're trying to do here. And then it's going to give Saturn something to build, something to focus on, something to put your effort into and to be able to accomplish with Saturn-Neptune conjoined and co-present here. New ways of going about this area of your life that you might not have thought were realistic previous. So there is a huge restructure. This can be literal to your home. If that's something that you've been wanting to do, this is definitely going to support that, especially if there's any rebuilding or redecorating. Your hand can be a bit forced by this in the sense that there may be obstacles that wind up cropping up within your physical home that have to be sorted out, but usually there's a major silver lining with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. You may actually wind up with a situation that you like a whole lot more after having to have dealt with something. So, for example, if there's like a not structurally sound patio or deck or something like this, and you decide, let's just scrap it and start from scratch, and actually really liking the outcome, the result of that kind of thing. But again, even when it comes to your private life, so what do you do when you go home? What does that look like? And how are you wanting to reshape and restructure that such that you feel more satisfied with it? You may be feeling a bit of burnout there, or a bit of disinterest or disillusionment around how that area of life is going. You may have even been neglecting it a bit. And this would be coming through and reprioritizing. What do you do in your free time? What do you do in your private life that's not just productive? This is also going to be impacting family patterns, especially narratives, beliefs, the roles that we play, like your beliefs about your family come up for a shakeup here. And you may have gotten glimpses of that last year. Like I have mentioned, we got a little glimpse of this in the summer of 25, and it's coming back around again. And what we can do here is establish something a whole heck of a lot better than we would have thought possible. So that's really nice. And I would say any sort of limits that you have about how you're able to relate to your family, Neptune will call those into question. Or even if you are deeply dissatisfied with your family, and that's not going to go anywhere, but you don't quite feel like you have established a chosen family yet, and you may question whether you'll ever be able to do that, this can also help you to connect with those kinds of people that really resonate with you deeply and that you can trust and make you feel safe and secure. So new notions of what family means. And again, those patterns, those foundations. So if there's any inner child work that needs to be done, if there was any neglect or frustration or conflict or, any sort of difficult challenges in your childhood, which I think for most of us, there's something there at least to be worked with. This helps a lot to dissolve the impact of that away, that old baggage, that old emotional structure and framework that we kind of take as given because it was established so early in life. This can help to break that apart and to point out where is the lie in that too. And that's what that disillusionment is that comes through with Saturn-Neptune. Now, we can wind up then wallowing on the other side of that, getting really disappointed and getting a bit stuck in, man, I wish that I hadn't believed that. But I would definitely recommend trying not to get stuck there in that place, but rather look at the disillusionment, the pointing out to you where there have been unnecessary limitations, etc., as a real gift and an invitation to start a new cycle when it comes to your emotional foundations and your patterns when it comes to family or chosen family. This is also going to help a lot with redefining a sense of security and belonging. So this is a little bit of that. If you need a chosen family, that sense of belonging being able to be built through this time. And it may not need to be outside of your family. This can be, for instance, if you were a black sheep, this would be coming through and shifting up that role and how you feel about being in that role. This may be a mark of pride that you're able to wear confidently during the holidays when you're dealing with your family, to establish deeply in yourself, rooting your sense of authority and security really, really, really deeply in your own core. And therefore not needing that approval from family, that in and of itself can wind up restructuring some of those notions of security within your family that may have served to present limitations or restrictions or constrictions on how much you feel like you can be really authentic and yourself and present your own beliefs and what you value to your family, without feeling like, oh, are they going to ridicule this or whatever. This Saturn-Neptune is going to be encouraging you to be able to present that kind of thing. And if they would, not caring as much. So any sort of past conditioning of you need my approval for things, recognizing that, this is going to point that out. It'll be helpful in pointing that out, which can be emotional for sure. But it's also doing that so that you can build up the necessary boundaries to that past conditioning, being able to, again, really firmly establish your sense of emotional security and regulation and sense of self and sense of belonging solely in yourself, and then building up from there. Other than all of that, I would not be surprised if this is, for a lot of people, going to be pointing to literally establishing a family. If you are expecting a baby at any point in the coming couple of years, I would say there's going to be a huge benefit to really thinking through, again, your emotional structures that you received from youth. What are the family patterns there? Which of those do you want to shift and change? What do you want of this new family to look different from your family of origin? Again, Neptune is going to be encouraging a sense of limitlessness. You can have the family that you're wanting, not just repeating the same kind of cycles or patterns. Even if you're not expecting a child, this can be establishing a home. So either of your own, going out independently, living on your own, or with someone new as well. And again, intentionality is going to be really huge with Saturn-Neptune. Try to keep your eye on how you're really wanting for that to look and be willing to just put in the effort to make that happen with a sense of confidence that it will, and it should go over really quite well. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. If there's complicated family stuff in your past, the biggest thing I can recommend with this is to just try your best. I know it's easier said than done, but to not get caught in the disappointment stage of disillusionment, but rather look at it as an invitation to start fresh, because this is a new cycle that we're stepping into here. But yeah, I hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Aquarius, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries taking place in your third house. And this is the house of your connections to that which is around you, as well as your mind. So thought process, communication, your neighborhood, your neighbors, your siblings, your peers, the people you deal with kind of on a daily basis, especially casually, your community, so quite literally your city, your state. This is also a place of learning and speaking and things like this. So this is going to be an area that's really excellent to think intently about in the coming few weeks and in the coming couple of years as well, about how it is that you want for your thought processes to go. So if there have been certain patterns that you've noticed, any self-limiting beliefs, especially regarding your role in the world, your impact on those around you, any assumptions that you have along those lines, any beliefs or thought processes that are kind of imported from that which is around you because it's convenient. So by that I mean like the way that the people around you think, the impact that has on how you process information as well. This is kind of a cultural thing, but we can even get into that in different regions in the US of thinking differently about certain things. And maybe there are certain notions that you've gone along with because it didn't seem maybe that important, but maybe you don't agree with, and maybe you don't want to follow quite anymore. So looking at what are your thought patterns and habits, and how do you want for those to change? How would it help you in life to be able to think more clearly, to feel like there's less mental clutter, but also to be able to relate with your environment from a place of greater confidence? This is going to be really helpful for setting any intentions along those lines. So, and also beyond like questioning cultural assumptions kind of across the board. So the opinion, the news, the ideas that are floating around, they're really easy to grab onto. Maybe checking in on how much of that is just taken kind of for granted and might not be absolute truth. Now, we don't all have to know what absolute truth is, but it's very healthy, especially with Saturn and Neptune in the third house, to question those kinds of things. And it can even wind up putting us into positions where we have to question those things. You may even feel the need to start speaking your mind more about independent thoughts that you have, or your real beliefs about things. So speaking up, speaking out, saying what you want, going after what you want, filling the roles that you want to fill within your community without feeling the need to shy away and facing the discomfort that can come in when there are social expectations that we are knowingly defying to basically make our mark or to mark out our space, to hold space for ourselves. And that may mean pursuing a different communication style. So being more strong, forceful in your communication, following through on your ideas, being courageous in going after your plans and prioritizing those. And there may be all manner of learning that's bound up with this. So this could literally be wanting to play a different role and going to school for that purpose because you want a different job or something like this. But this can also be digging into psychology and understanding your conscious mind better, and maybe what goes on under the surface there with Neptune bringing a sense of depth to your conscious mind. And with Saturn and Neptune there, you could definitely build a lot of wisdom around people's behaviors in everyday life, including your own. But there can also just be the learning curve of building new habits and building new patterns and trial and error, basically. That's one thing that we'll go over pretty well with Saturn and Neptune in this area is just trial and error. Try things out. Try different approaches when it comes to interacting with the people around you. What way of expressing yourself feels right and feels good when you are doing that? You should be getting a lot of clues along those lines, which can help your voice to become a lot more clear, to help you to speak more authentically, to help you maybe to establish verbal boundaries as well. If you have a tendency to say yes, this can totally teach you how to say no. And it probably will also put you in positions where you'll need to with Saturn and Neptune there. Now, finally, this can also have a lot to do with disillusionment, Saturn and Neptune. When they come together, they point out where the other is false. So the assumptions, the false assumptions. And having that in the third house, this is a place of media. the media we consume, the information we interact with and see in the world, the communications that we see, the ideas that we see that are local, that are, again, taken for granted. These kind of common sense, dominant narratives about the world, maybe even our place in it, but certainly the place of others in it. And I would not be surprised if a lot of the disillusionment aspect of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction for you guys is going to be around those dominant narratives. And when we do get into disillusionment, we can wind up really fundamentally disappointed and almost feeling dejected, even a bit depressive. But I don't think that that is what Saturn and Neptune set out to do. It's about building up a new structure, reestablishing narratives. We can see how the dominant narratives have been dissolving in the world. And you may have had a major keen eye on how that's been going over the past couple of years. But as these two come together and then Saturn starts to move on from Neptune, this is very much about creating a new belief system, a new set of ideas about the world that are truer. So disillusionment, it is a good thing. It's an illusion that we were under that is removed. And so I hope that there won't be a lot of dwelling in that disappointment aspect of that, but rather try to take the reins, try and really set your intentions on, well, I'm going to build out new ideas and new opinions. Having opinions isn't wrong, just because some of them have been wrong in the past. But these are going to be then better informed by all of that experience that I have now. Finally, I'll just throw this out there as well. With the third or the fourth house, we can see some moves, some physical moves. This would point to changes, shifts, like restructuring basically within your community or of your community, which can look like local changes, new constructions, things like this, like your community changing its nature, right? Or looking quite different. Or this can mean that you're literally in a different community, literally different local space that you're occupying. And if that's the case, if you're wanting to move, this can help you to do that if you're wanting to change communities, but this can also force our hand sometimes. If there's a move that needs to be made, this is going to make that happen. So that's another aspect here that you may wind up running into. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. So I do really hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Pisces, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries will take place in your second house. This is the house of your personal resources, your livelihood, that which you value. And so this has a lot to do with how you earn a living, your possessions, accumulation, things like this in a very mundane sense. But it can definitely go quite a bit more psychological and esoteric than that. So we wind up getting into notions of safety, security, self-worth as well. How much do you value yourself and what you're bringing to the table? So this is going to be a good area to actively focus. One thing with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is that we can set some really wonderful intentions with it to accomplish something that may seem impossible or may seem like a pipe dream. But Neptune is really setting out a path for Saturn to pave. So what is it that you're really wanting to experience when it comes to how you view your own personal value? What are the personal resources that you have, your talents, your skills, your positive qualities, or your bank account, your titles, things like this that can also help you to develop a sense of safety and security and foundation in your life? What of those are you wanting to develop more? If you're willing to name those now and set your sights on those, and then have the intention and put some effort into going after that, Saturn and Neptune together here can really make a lot of that happen. It can be a major assist to that. So that's how I would really recommend actively utilizing this, is taking stock, again, of personal resources, your livelihood, your financial situation, your sense of safety and security and resilience and self-reliance and independence in your own life as well. Focusing on those things and building that out the way that you want to, because that is getting restructured during this period of time, and the more cognizant that we can be And the more that we can guide that process, I think the better. So issues of self-worth are likely to come up here and there. This isn't always just a purely pleasant kind of a transit, but it does provide a huge amount of wisdom whenever it does present challenges or obstacles to us. And it will absolutely encourage us to overcome them. Neptune itself is going to tell us that there aren't any limits, there aren't any real restrictions. And so whatever may be in one's own mind restricting self-worth, Neptune's going to say that that restriction isn't real, and Saturn's going to be able to build the kinds of habits that can prove that to you. And this restructuring is also then going to reach into financial considerations. I am kind of wondering if, especially a lot of Pisces rising people, maybe Pisces in general, especially now, it's been pointed out to me, and I think this is important for Pisces placements and Pisces rising to know, that since about 2003 or so, we haven't, I'm a Pisces Sun and Mercury and Venus and North Node, we haven't had a moment really where there wasn't an outer planet in Pisces. So since about 2003. So we've been kind of under the gun and under a lot of weird kind of pressures and things like that for a very long time at this point, and are very used to it and have weathered that and worked through all of that. And so there is a sense of inner resilience, even if it's not always in the conscious mind. It is very much there in Pisces. Our convictions have certainly been shored up throughout this whole process, our sense of what we truly believe in. And for the Pisces rising people with this, moving into the second house in particular, I can't help but wonder if there's going to be a lot of people who want to be independent when it comes to how you earn your livelihood, or at least more independent, and looking for different ways maybe of managing your resources such that you're able to accomplish that. Again, Neptune's going to say the financial structure you're looking for, don't place, oh, is this realistic? Is it not? Kinds of restrictions on that. Neptune's going to sort out whether something is quote unquote realistic by moving things around until it is. And again, Saturn's going to support any effort that you wind up putting into that. And some of that is going to be through active effort of developing personal resources, as in your skills or your confidence or your ability to wear a bunch of different hats on a given day. For instance, if you literally are wanting to start a business or something like this. So there's a new cycle that's kicking off here with regard to your livelihood. There may be moments of confusion. There may be moments of weird detours. I'm sure that you're familiar with those Neptunian detours at this point as well. Neptune's been in Pisces since 2011. We had Uranus in Pisces prior to that. But I'm sure you're very used to those weird little detours and you know how to follow them and pick up the valuable aspects of that and then move along to the next thing and not get too hung up on any given path or destination. You know, things are always changing, but as long as this livelihood that you're aiming at and that you're trying to establish is rooted really in your sense of resilience and confidence in your ability to create your own reality, I think that that's going to really release any sort of restrictions or limitations on what you're able to accomplish when it comes to your foundation, your safety, your security, which does also speak to habits, internal habits around, do you feel like you need to depend upon other people, or that you need to have other people dependent upon you for some sense of value or safety, security, etc. Pull back from that hard if that is the case. I know we can struggle with that a bit, and that's part of the reality of Pisces, is a desire to interdepend with others. But if we're doing that with people who are not interdependent, but rather codependent, we can wind up getting sucked into that kind of thing as well. And I do have to say, Saturn and Neptune in your second could pose little lessons along the way of over-reliance upon other people. This is really about the life that you are establishing for yourself foremost. But yeah, I think that's a lot of the overarching stuff that I want to cover for this conjunction. Again, time frame, this is going to be perfecting on February 20th. I would not be surprised if that general week around that date is going to be some of the most poignant lessons of this. But we're going to continue to develop this wisdom and these processes and these habits and these new paths and things over the coming couple of years, as long as Saturn is in Aries, which again is until April of 2028. So we have some time with this. There's not a huge rush, but we do have a very valuable moment of this coming up in February. So yeah, I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me.